That's cool. Well, I was thinking about using it. I saw the announcement.
Oh, I love it.
yesterday.
Well, yeah, flying like this or flying supersonic from a pilot's point of view is no different.
5:30. Took down the
Just going faster.
Yeah, that's for sure.
and linked in around 5:30.
Okay.
All right?
1 minute, we'll start.
How you been, Mel?
Hi, how you been?
Good, good, good.
Yep, I think we're good to go.
Way to go, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi.
Almost.
All right, yeah, almost.
Magic hour. Turn off my phone.
So weird.
Silent phone, yeah.
Like I need to spread out.
I'm at the wrong side of the table at a high school dance.
Oh. Wake up call.
Start the meeting, yeah. I guess that means time to start.
Dogs are barking.
As soon as we're organized over there, we'll get started. Give them a few more seconds to get started. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, it's when I start talking. Okay.
Proceed.
Try again. All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Boca Raton Airport Authority, Wednesday, August 17th, 2022. And just remind everybody that we are being recorded on Zoom for all comments, and anyone who has commentary, if we can get the mic working, we'll ask you to go up to the podium. So let's start with the roll call. Christine?
Mr. Knapp?
Here?
Mr. Tucker?
Here.
Mr. Noble? Ms. Budd? Mr. Fogel? Mr. Bolden?
Here?
And Mr. Pollak?
Here. Say, for the record, we do have a quorum then? 4? All right. First order of business is approval of the minutes for...
Chair, if I may, Ms. Budd is trying to dial in.
Okay.
I apologize for the interruption.
Sure.
Can you try to resend it?
Long time no see. How you doing? Doing good. If you can right up there.
Send it.
Hello? Hello? At, Mr. Fogel?
Yes, it is.
Right, we can hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect.
Okay, can we proceed? Okay, we have Mitch Fogel on the line and Cheryl Budd's trying to call in. So we do have a quorum, and our first order of business is approval of the minutes of the July 20th, 2022 meeting.
Hey, Mitch,
You might want to put yourself on silent, on mute.
why don't you, well said, put it on mute.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're getting some feedback there. Thank you. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion.
Motion, so moved.
We had the minutes
Second.
in our package, we had a motion, second. Any questions, comments, corrections? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? All right, agenda changes. Ms. Bennett, are there any agenda changes?
No, sir, there are not. However, there is a request from legal counsel to begin the discussion regarding the state issues as close to 5:30 as possible. They are participating remotely and at another meeting, so they would like to start at 5:30 if we can. So we request kind of working through the agenda till we get till 5:30.
All right, without any objection, if you'd remind me when we get close to 5:30, we'll switch the agenda items at that time. So, public request. If any member of the public wishes to provide a comment on any item, the time to do so is now. Please complete a public comment card identifying the item upon which you wish to be heard and provide it to Ms. Landers here to my left. The public comment cards are located in the back of the room. Each member of the public wishing to comment will be provided with 5 minutes to do so. The chair reserves the right to move the public comment opportunity on a specific agenda item to the point in the agenda when that item is to be considered and/or to extend the allotted time per speaker. So, Ms. Landers, do we have any input? None? Consent agenda. Any items on the consent agenda?
Not tonight.
And federal and state and municipal input, any input?
We have none.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the financial report, the July financial report. We're looking for a review and approval of the financial report from July 2022. I'll just note before Robert gives the presentation that our Secretary Treasurer, Randy Noble, is not able to participate this evening, but he has assured me that he reviewed the detailed financial reports and recommends the board accept the report. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert Abbott to go through the summary financial reports. Robert?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see, the total operating revenues year to date are approximately $5.6 million. That's about 15.4% above your budget year to date. And that's primarily due to the seasonal nature of the fuel flowage and some of our customs revenues. The total operating expenses year to date are approximately $9 million, which is down approximately 24.9% budget year to date. And that's primarily due to some of the project-related expenses that haven't occurred yet, but we expect to. And so you can see the net income before depreciation would be about $2.7 million. So on behalf of Airport Management and Secretary Treasurer, we respectfully present the July 2022 financial report to you.
Okay. Thank you. Before we have discussion, I'll look for a motion to approve the July financial report.
So moved.
Okay, Robert, and second? Mel? Okay, any questions or comments, anything you saw in the package?
I just noticed that, as I mentioned to Claire, our legal expenses are very high this year.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we had some unexpected monthly recurring expenses related to a lease negotiation with Premier, settling those issues, as well as the rather large amended and restated lease with Atlantic Aviation. Those were two unusual events this year, but we suspect that, or hope that we will be leveling off on those expenses now that those two big issues have been settled for the time being.
Yeah, good point. Okay, any other comments? Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Tenant reports and requests. Premier Aviation has a sign request, and Mr. Kohut, you're going to present this item for us?
Yes, sir. As you can see from your backup, you may have noticed driving down Airport Road, we do have the new restaurant on the Premier parcel that recently opened. We have some visitors from them that I'll introduce here in a minute. But in accordance with the Airport Authority sign standards, you may remember from in the past, it is a two-step process where they get conditional approval for the sign from this board. They then take that resolution to the city, who then goes through their permit process, CAB, and everything else, and then issues the permit, at which point in time they'll come back for final approval, and then they'll have 90 days to go ahead and install that sign. There is some pictures of the sign in your backup. We'll go ahead and bring them on here on the screen. It's very similar to the location and size of the former signs. There are 2 on the building. Typically, that requires a variance within the city. They were granted variances in the last 2 times, so that may hold over, or they may have to pull for a new variance, but they are intending to put up the 2 signs, one on the south face, or west face there, and then one on the south face as well. So in accordance with Airport Management recommends approval of resolution number 08-20-22, the Boca Raton Airport Authority authorizing conditional approval to Premier Aviation of Boca Raton LLC for permanent exterior signage to La Condesa Mexican Restaurant. As mentioned, we do have Kelly and Salvador here from the restaurant if you'd like to ask them any questions or find out any of their upcoming plans.
Okay, let's first, if we can get a motion and a second, and then we'll move to discussion.
Okay.
Second.
Gene makes a motion, Bob. Okay, great. We have a motion second. Any questions or comments on the sign and/or for our owners here?
I think it looks good.
Yeah?
It looks good.
Pardon my ignorance of Spanish, but what does La Condesa mean, and what's the relation to the image? What is the?
So, La Condesa.
You want,
Okay.
Yeah.
is there a mic up there?
Hasn't been working so much. You could ask.
You'll just have to project.
Up a little bit.
So Condesa means like royalty in the Mexican culture. I know other countries mean something else, but for us it stands for royalty is normally like female power, and
Okay.
And the image fit is,
it's alebrije, and it's in our culture, when we die normally, we like to think that we're going into another world where there we have a spiritual guide that's an animal. So right now, our spiritual guide is a lion, and we like to think she's a female.
That's great.
and you've been open about a month, or?
Yes, we opened on the 1st.
And how's business been going?
Right now, we kind of slow, but we are hoping to do a grand opening on the 20th. Right now, we are open for business, but it's a soft opening so that our staff gets familiar with the area and the food, the new dishes that we have in the menu.
Well, hopefully with,
The write-ups online are excellent.
yeah, and hopefully with FAU starting and football games, that will help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a website up?
We do.
And is the menu on the website?
Oh, yeah. All 38 pages. Huge menu.
Oh, good.
We're all invited after this meeting, and there's on.
Great. Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much, and best wishes to you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of Resolution 8/2022, say aye.
All right, see?
Any opposed? Unanimously approved. Best wishes to you. Congratulations. The sign looks good. Good luck with the city approval. Next step, right?
You can stay as long as you wish to.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
welcome to stay, or if you need to get back, that's fine. No problem. All right, I think we still have a little more time, right?
Yes.
And so let's move on to the noise abatement operations summary for the month of June 2022. Robert Pratt.
Thank you. Good evening. Robert Pratt, Operations Coordinator. Before you is the Operations and Noise Abatement Report for the month of July 2022. During the month of July, there were 5,476 operations. It didn't change over this one.
It isn't the Friday the 13th, is it?
Got a few
Yeah.
gremlins today.
Big round.
Really? There we go.
So during the month of July, there were 5,476 operations, which is a 17% increase over operations of July of last year. Jet A deliveries were down 10% compared to July 2021, and avgas deliveries were up 100% compared to last July. There were 8 different households that filed noise concerns during the month, most of which were from the on-time web portal. During the month of July, Customs had 125 aircraft clearings, which is slightly down from 130 total aircraft clearings for July 2021, and there were no vessel clearings for the month. These 125 aircraft arrived from a total of 17 different countries, and there were 37 after clearings in the month, of which 23 occurred on days when the facility is normally closed. And that concludes the operations report for the month of July.
Okay, great. Any questions for? Let's move on to the Safety Management System Software Acquisition Contract Award. And Robert, you're going to do this one as well?
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you is a contract award for SMS software that was put out this year, a request for proposal, April 2022. As the board will recall, this is the agenda item that was removed from last month's agenda, so the airport management and legal counsel could review further information regarding one of the bidders. After our review, the number 1 ranked bidder was found unresponsive and unresponsible, and so the company that ranked second, Epic Engineering and Consulting Group, moved into the number 1 ranked position. The contract will be a 5-year contract, starting on September 1st, 2022. Unfortunately, a representative from Epic Engineering was not able to be here tonight. However, I prepared a short presentation to talk about what SMS is and to highlight some of the key features of how Epic Engineering software will be used for SMS. So firstly, what is SMS? The FAA defines a safety management system as a formalized approach to managing safety. Airports will do this by developing a safety policy, utilizing formal methods for identifying, analyzing, and mitigating risks, methods for ensuring safety improvement, and developing organizational strategies to promote safety. In July 2016, the FAA issued a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking for Part 139 air carrier airports to implement an SMS program. Although Boca is a general aviation airport and not a 139 airport, we do strive to mimic Part 139 safety standards when feasible, and the proposed rulemaking appears to possibly be going into effect for GA airports in the near future, so we're getting a head start on implementing our program. There are 4 components that make up an SMS. The first one being safety policy, which speaks to the Boca Airport's commitment to safety, roles and responsibilities, organizational structure, and SMS goals and objectives for the airport. The second one speaks to safety assurance, which is the ability to collect safety and operational data and analyze it to track safety performance. Safety risk management includes a proactive process of determining hazards, assessing risk, and also mitigating it. And safety promotion focuses on training, orientation of the SMS program, and promotion of general safety. This is an example of a safety risk matrix, focusing on the third component of a SMS safety risk management. The SMS software that we're looking to sign a contract for includes a safety risk matrix, which allows us to rate hazards based on severity or frequency, and it's also customizable, so we can come up with risk matrices for whatever we deem necessary for our airport. So what are some of the benefits of SMS? SMS will provide many benefits to the airport in the way safety will be proactively managed, such as ensuring compliance with legal responsibilities for safety and reducing costs that could be incurred related to safety hazards. As the board will recall, in 2017, we did a gap analysis to determine our best way to move forward with implementing an SMS program. The analysis showed that we had many of the necessary components of a successful SMS, and that purchasing software would allow us to aggregate all of the data and that we collect and put it into one place.
Hello?
So estimates what it's going to do at the Boca Airport. It will help us identify safety hazards. It will ensure that actions are taken to mitigate risks and hazards, provide for continuous monitoring and regular assessment of the level of safety at the airport, and it will allow users and tenants the ability to report safety concerns. Our number one ranked bidder is Epic Engineering and Consulting Group. They are an engineering company that not only provides estimate software, but also provides services to other industries such as schools, public works, parks, and recreation. Their software is user-friendly, and the contract will include modules that allow us to keep track of hazards, incidents, and accidents, as well as many other features. Epic also has many clients, including multiple other airports, and the picture to the right is a small example of what one of the modules will look like when using their software. This is an example of how Epic Engineering software follows the FAA's estimate process, identifying safety hazards, corrective action for those hazards, analysis and preventive mitigation, and monitoring and reporting. And the next slide is an example again of Epic software, including the risk matrix. With that, airport management recommends approval of resolution number 0821, awarding the contract for safety management systems communication with Epic Engineering and Consulting Group.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much. So, we have a recommendation for approval. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, Robert, second. Mel? All right, questions. I know we had more information even than that in our board packages, but I appreciate the highlights there. So, Mel, you had a question for us?
Two questions. Where is Epic located?
They are Florida-based. I believe they're in the Orlando area, so they are.
Oh, so they're nearby.
Yes, sir.
Secondly, it's very unusual when the first-ranked firm, all of a sudden, either, what would they pull out, or they're non-responsive, or?
Correct. There was additional information that came, that was brought to light after the rankings, the initial rankings, and after review of that information, they were determined non-responsible and non-responsive.
Thank you.
And there was also an appeal period. Did they, that
Correct.
I think ended
It ends,
recently, or?
it is ending right now as we speak, because we gave them until the start of this meeting, and
Yeah.
there was no formal appeal made
Oh, okay, good.
By the firm that was ranked lower?
by the previously number
Yeah,
one ranked
previously.
firm, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's important to know. Yeah, Gene? Yes, sir.
Robert, could you pull up the first matrix slide that you had there? I hate to put you on the spot here, but.
No problem.
Stand by.
Given all the technology successes we've had.
Yeah, I could see that.
Friday the 13th.
Okay. We have different, obviously, levels of concern here. Can you give us an example of what each of these, what might be a catastrophic hazard, major, minor, or negligible?
Personally, it's something that I'm still learning about myself, so I wouldn't be able to tell you at the moment exactly how it works. I know for something, for example, something like maybe a wildlife strike or a bird strike, it's something that happens every now and then at the airport, and that could be rated as something we would determine, based on the frequency, how much of a hazard that could be to the airport, and then come up with plans on how to mitigate that further. But yeah, to speak to any other catastrophic or
hazard generally would be an incident that would result in loss of life or loss of the aircraft. Major would definitely be a major damage incident to the aircraft, and then minor and negligible would be steps below that. Sort of how you use the matrix is we do this when we work with the control tower for planning construction projects. We'll develop different scenarios saying, okay, a construction worker leaves a foot-long wrench on the runway. What's the risk probability? Well, that might be remote or low, but it's going to be a very catastrophic or hazardous incident. You can think of the Concorde incident was a result of something similar. So even though the risk is extremely low, since the severity is catastrophic or hazardous, that would be a no-go decision. So whatever might lead to that risk being present on the airfield wouldn't be allowed throughout the project. So there'd be additional inspections put in or additional SOPs to make sure that the runway was completely cleared before it reopened in the morning.
let's take an example of an aircraft that goes off the runway into the grass. How would you classify that?
Well, that would, if it's off the runway and into the grass, and it's being dealt with through regular SOPs, such as the tower closes the airport, so there's no additional aircraft that can come in, it'd be a very low-risk situation because the runway's been closed, there's no additional aircraft coming in. If this was to happen sometime, say, overnight, that could be a higher-risk issue because obviously there might not be notifications of that incident occurring. Now, this isn't necessarily looking at that incident as to why the aircraft went in the grass, just the results of the aircraft going into the grass. How does that affect the safety system of the airport?
How about a fuel spill? How would that be? How would you treat that?
Fuel spill would probably be fairly low because unless it's a major fuel spill where you've got an entire tank leaking out by a fuel farm, there's going to be very little risk. Typically, they'll disperse. The higher risk there is more of an environmental component than an actual, life or equipment type component. So that might be a little bit more towards the major or minor side, and as you can see, there might be a little bit more tolerance for something like that as you're, evaluating the different scenarios.
All right, thank you.
Mitch, I know you're on the line, so I just want to give you a chance, and I don't know if Cheryl Budd was able to join us, but either one, if you have any comments or questions.
No, you guys have asked some good questions. Can you hear me, by the way? I know looks like service was coming and going. No, I heard everything. Pardon me?
I was just going to say, I've been told that Cheryl may be having trouble coming off mute, so if the mute on your phone isn't necessarily working, you can try *6.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have one other thing.
Mel, thank you.
I read the whole scope of this contract, and I think we're getting very good value for the cost of the 5-year contract.
And I'll remind the board as well that this is grant funded, so 80% of the costs are being subsidized by the state of Florida.
It seems like very good value for the money.
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds like a very good addition to our safety program. Do we ever get audited on these things? Does it help us if FAA or Florida Department of Transportation audits us? I don't know.
There's no FDOT component to it yet. There may be an FAA component to audits. If it ever is required at a general aviation airport, there are audits, throughout the 139 system based on that being an actual requirement. But like it did say, it is something that we do work with the tower on if we're planning a construction project or some change to the system that might cause a hazard.
So I could see it'd be helpful in that.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
We got a couple minutes to our next program, but Gene, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a good program. I'd like to see some samples of how it's working on reports in future meetings. I think that'd be a great idea.
Probably have the company come down to a future meeting in the next month or two, and maybe walk you through a demonstration.
Right.
Well, great. Once it's implemented.
Right. Once we have data.
When data comes in, we'd like to see how that's treated.
Yeah, maybe we can look at a quarterly or semi-annually.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So we've had our discussion. If no other questions, we do have a motion and a second for Resolution 82122. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Robert. So I think we're right around 5:30. So we have an issue here, legal counsel on review of state issues. And
they are on. Trust me.
Do you want to introduce Clara and our guests?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Ms. Petrick is here as well, but we do have Bob Scherfer and Chris Pine with with the firm participating telephonically. And the purpose of this presentation and the discussion is, as we've discussed over the last few months, there are certain things that may warrant a review at the state level related to our enabling legislation, as well as the lease with the state. There may be other things that we would want to look at as we embark on this project. I mentioned as well in the budget that we are requesting a set aside specifically for this project if the board decides to go forward with it. that is what legal counsel is looking for, is some feedback from you after they conclude their remarks as to the scope of effort that you believe would be most beneficial for them and for the team, for all of us to engage in.
Okay.
So I think, Bob, you are on the call, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Clara. Good evening, and we appreciate you letting us appear remotely. As Clara said, we've looked at a couple of state issues that concern you guys. We started with the question of the lease because I know that has come up recently, and that naturally morphed into a discussion of your special act. And I do understand that there have been questions that have come up from time to time on the act, so it's appropriate to talk about. But I'll talk about the lease first and the tie-in to your special act, and then introduce and set the stage for Chris to have a process-related discussion about what the special act process is and timing issues and that sort of thing. You have, when you originally got a lease from the state of Florida, you got a 90-year lease. 50 years of it remains on the term. And in looking at it and having a discussion about the renewal of that or extension of it, because you have some tenants who would look for more time to capitalize improvements, it's a fairly, I would say, non-remarkable proposition to go deal with the state of Florida and the trustees on a lease like this, particularly for a big infrastructure project that's clearly not going away, and get an extension on it. But in talking to Clara, it occurred to us that this is one of those places where, given that you've got a 90-year lease to begin with, you essentially have the fee. And if you essentially have the fee for all practical purposes, why don't we go ask the state for the fee actually? This is something that we have done several times in the past for clients, public clients, is to get a direct legislative property transfer to the entity. I know we've done it for Port Manatee. We did it for FAU, Pine Jog, and up in West Palm Beach area. So that leads to a discussion of, well, okay, well, that's something that we can do then with your special act. That's clearly something that could be accomplished by going into your enabling legislation and creating a bill to push through the legislature that would convey the underlying property to the authority directly in fee. We have not done a real deep dive on all of the various powers and the other bringing current, your current act. It was done originally in 1982, so every few decades you probably ought to look at it. But I do understand from Clara that there have been some issues that have been raised by board members over time. Given that you are a creature of statute, you have a special act, you are an independent special district, the only way to change that is to take that act back to Tallahassee and amend it. Chris Lyon, who is on the phone, is a shareholder in a Tallahassee office, and Chris spends most of his life in special district world, and particularly in legislative special district world. So I'm going to ask Chris, if he would, to give a discussion about what it takes to do a special act bill amendment. And with the notion, Chris, that one thing we might want to ask for here is a direct fee transfer from the state to the authority. And you might talk about money as well.
Sure. Thanks, Bob, and good evening, everyone. As Bob introduced me, my name is Chris Lyon. I'm an attorney like Bob and Amy, but my practice is a little bit different than theirs. My practice is solely dealing in legislative and governmental affairs. I am in our Tallahassee office. I live in Tallahassee full-time, and the legislature and dealing with the state agencies is my full-time practice. As Bob mentioned, we have handled a number of special district issues in the past due to our firm's relationships with special districts in the state. I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say that our firm has handled more local bills in the legislature than any other firm out there, just solely because of our relationships with the various special districts around the state. It is a unique process. It is different than if you were to go try, if a legislator were to file a general bill. A general bill applies statewide and applies uniformly across the state. A local bill applies only in a specified jurisdiction. And in the case of the Boca Raton Airport Authority, as Bob said, you all were created by the legislature. It gave you your powers. It is the one that has to amend those powers or obligations or responsibilities. And the way that's done is through a local bill. The process, as I said, is a bit different. The first step that has to be done, and this is absolutely different than a general bill, any local bill, before it can be filed with the legislature, must be approved by your local legislative delegation. And in your case, that would be the Palm Beach County legislative delegation. And that is comprised of any senator or any representative that represents a portion of Palm Beach County. Some of them, their districts would be wholly within Palm Beach County, but on that delegation also would be anyone that represents any portion. So the first step is you have to bring your local bill, your draft local bill, forward to the Palm Beach County delegation. My recommendation would be that you lobby every member of that delegation to make sure they understand what you're trying to do in your local bill, why you're trying to do it, and answer any questions they might have. Ultimately, you have to have a House sponsor for a local bill. You don't necessarily need a Senate sponsor, but you must have a House sponsor. So you would be looking for a House member to bring that bill forward. You would hope that the delegation would support it after you've met with them and briefed them on the issue. And very important to a local bill, you need to make sure all of the senators on your delegation are on board, because there is a rule in the Senate that I won't bore you with the intricacies of it, but in summary, the rule allows any single senator from the delegation to effectively kill that local bill. So you could spend all your time going through the delegation, working it through the House, passing it through the House, and when it comes to the Senate, right at the end of session, a single senator can kill the bill. So it's important to work your entire delegation with a specific importance placed on those senators because of that power that they have. Assuming you can make it through the local delegation, the next thing that has to be done is you have to publish a notice of intent to seek legislation in your local newspaper. That must be published at least 30 days before the bill can be filed in the legislature. Once those 30 days have run, the bill can be filed. And at that point, it's similar to other bills, those general bills that I talked about, in that in order for that bill to pass, there is lots of work that has to be done to make sure that that the bill starts moving and is heard in the committees that it's been referenced to. After the bill is filed, it will be the Speaker of the House will reference it to committees. The average that a bill gets is probably 3 committee references. Some local bills only get 2, but 2 to 3 is probably what you're looking at. So you have to go and move your bill through each and every one of those committees. That involves meeting with the chairman of the committee. That involves meeting with every member of that committee to make sure, if you can get the bill on the agenda, that the bill can pass successfully through the committee. I will say, in the case of a local bill, the first committee that it will be referenced to would be the Local Affairs Subcommittee. That is the most difficult committee for a local bill to make the agenda. That committee is the gatekeeper of all the local bills. And that is, if you can make it on that committee agenda and pass through that committee, your chances of making it to the end of the process are vastly improved. That's the tough committee to overcome. But ultimately, let's assume you can pass that committee and pass through your other committees, you're then voted on by the full House. In most cases, the House votes the bills out on a local bill calendar, which is probably what you all would consider a consent calendar, where there's a number of items on it, all passed on a singular vote of the board. In this case, the legislature puts all local bills on a local bill calendar, and they are voted out by a single solitary vote of the House. There's an exception to that. If your local bill has something in it that is different than what is in general law, and general law is essentially those statute books that may be in the room that you're in today. I don't know, but if something in your local bill differs from what is in the statutes, then you cannot be placed on the local bill calendar. You must be voted on separately by the full House, and you must pass by a 3/5 vote. It's usually not an issue to get the 3/5 vote, because once you've made it to that point, you've probably answered most of leadership's concerns or issues with your bill, but that's the process. Once you've passed the House, you then go to the Senate, where again, if most bills are put on a local bill calendar, passed on a single vote, again, unless your local bill has some exceptions to general law, in which case you must be voted on separately and receive a 3/5 vote. That is the point where a single senator under the Senate rules can pull a bill off the calendar for consideration. So that's why I mentioned you really got to make sure you have your senators on board up front, because that's a long process with a lot of work involved to get to there, only to be surprised, at the end by a senator suddenly expressing concern with your bill and perhaps pulling it from consideration. Assuming that doesn't occur and the Senate passes your bill, it then goes to the governor for his consideration or her consideration. And the governor has 15 days to act on the bill once it is sent to his or her office. And he can veto the bill, or he can allow the bill to become law, or he can actually sign the bill. There's essentially three options, two of which result in the bill becoming law. That is the local bill process in a nutshell. I summarized it in about 5 minutes, but each and every one of those steps, there's a lot of work that goes in to making sure that bill successfully moves through the process and continues moving once it starts. As Bob mentioned, on the lease issue, the land lease issue, we have done local bills to that effect in the past. Specifically, I worked on a bill for Port Manatee, where we, similar to what you all have to do, if there's some modification you need, you have to go to the Board of Trustees, which is the cabinet. They had to do the same thing. And we were able to pass a bill giving them essentially title to the submerged lands under the area that they operate in, so that if they needed to dredge, for instance, each and every time they needed to dredge, they didn't need to go back to the cabinet for approval. So that is something we have experience in. I won't say that it's something that occurs on a regular basis, but it has occurred in the past, and we've been successful working on that. Other things that we do for special districts at the legislature, we seek appropriations for special districts. We've been successful over the years getting water projects for districts. There's no reason that your airport authority couldn't also seek state appropriations for projects, upcoming projects you might have. I took a quick look before the call through the current year's state budget, and I saw about a dozen different airport projects that made this year's budget, a number of which are airport authorities, so special districts that operate airports. So that's also something that we do for our district clients, and there's no reason that if you all had an interest in that, we couldn't talk about how that process would work. We also represent special districts just on a general monitoring role on an annual basis. Virtually every industry has a statewide association. I know airports are no different. You have an association. And associations are great because they represent that industry's interests at what I'll call 40,000 foot view. Where the rubber meets the road, though, is sometimes an individual member of the association's interest might be different than the majority of the members of the association. And oftentimes those interests, because maybe you're the only one with that particular issue, your issues aren't addressed by the statewide association. So we have done that and do that for districts where we make sure that we're watching for bills and amendments that are filed that might affect them uniquely or might affect the industry in general. And we try to make sure that we protect and promote the interests of those clients. So those are some of the things that we do for districts at the legislature. I'd be happy to answer any questions you all might have. Bob and Amy know airport issues much better than I do. And so I would certainly be leaning on them in gathering my knowledge in how to pursue, your interests. But my specialty and my relationships are with the legislature and the legislative process. So I feel like it would be a great team if that was something that you all were looking to do. So if you all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Bob, for your expertise and that summary of the process. So again, this is a long-term issue, right, Clara? I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of tell us about the cost benefit if we want to even pursue this. I think the first step would be some kind of investigation, whether it would be worthwhile. It sounds, based on what Chris is saying, that we couldn't have anything ready for the local legislative delegation anyway, since they're going to meet in October, I would think. I think they start the committee process before the session starts, I believe, in March. So, Mel, you want to talk first, and then
what are we pursuing?
Mr. Chairman?
It can be any number of things that Chris outlined, as well as any other issues that are at the state level that are within the purview of the legislation. So one of the thoughts that we had just as a team, and we wanted to get your input on, was this notion of the land transfer. We have a lease that is with the state that Chris mentioned is coming up on 50 years. We just signed a 40-year lease with Atlantic Aviation that gives them an option for an additional 10 years. So as we look to create those opportunities through the master plan process and other processes for incentivizing our tenants to do additional investments similar to that, we may run into, in fact, we will run into that date certain with the state lease. There may be other ideas that we can identify, some properties that are underutilized, that are state-owned, that we might want to make a pitch for the state to transfer to us, since we have a successful track record of developing property to the benefit of the local community. So those are the kinds of things that we can look at and bundle, because if we're going to go through this exhaustive process that Chris identified for us, and working with our delegation in Palm Beach, I think it bears reviewing each of these different types of goals that you may have as an entity, and bundling them together so that we go through that process once and get one bite at the apple.
Mr. Chairman, if I might make one quick clarification.
Okay, that's Chris. Is that Chris?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, this is Chris again.
Just something.
Okay. I just want to make a quick clarification. Because this is an election year, the delegations will not meet until after the election occurs. So, as far as whether there is time to pull something together, I leave that to you all to decide, but the delegations won't meet until probably, my guess is, beginning in December, and then session begins on March 7th this year. So there's a little more time than I believe you initially thought.
Great, thank you for the clarification. Amy?
So one kind of just piece of information for context, because you're a special district, that means that you can only do the things that are expressly referenced in your special act. And so if you're going to undertake a review of your special act, opportunities that you may see in the future that you're not wanting to pursue now, but that you can see the industry is heading in a particular direction, it would make sense for you to put that in. And just as an example, everybody's been talking about Reedy Creek, which is the Disney World Special District. They have powers that are so beyond things that Disney is currently operating to do, but when they wrote it, they shot for the moon, in terms of what kind of powers that, they wanted to have so that they could be creative. And because y'all don't support yourself through taxes, you may want to similarly think about revenue-producing activities both within your jurisdiction, that being the airport footprint, and potentially outside of the airport footprint, so that you can stay as self-sustaining as possible, so that you can stay on top of what's actually happening in your industry. There may be partnerships, there may be revenue streams that you want to pursue, and having some time to think about that at a staff level and to really beef up your powers is an efficient use of your time if you're going to go through this process. So we've talked about the state lands thing, which is it's expressly referenced in Section 10 of your Enabling Act that currently title vests with the Board of Trustees. That would be amended. But there's a whole host of other issues that would give you operational room for creativity that you may want to have staff weigh in on.
Yes, Mel?
You talk about land transfer and incentivizing our clients. Are we talking about extending the lease from the state or taking over the airport from the state, or?
I think our recommendation would be to shoot for the latter, so that there is no subservient.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. Correct.
That's interesting. Okay.
Correct, so that because we would be running, this is going to come up at sometime in the future again, and as Bob mentioned, a 90-year lease sort of contemplates a transfer. And there are things we can talk to the DP about, sort of how they view the management of this lease and how onerous or transparent it is to them, because this is the state agency that manages the lease for the state. And so I think the initial recommendation that we would have at first blush would be to try to effect a land transfer. Then it is the airport authority that is the entity that is solely responsible for the property. But obviously, if that can't happen, we would want to extend the lease.
Yeah, Chris, thank you for that painful presentation. If we were successful, what, if any, would be disadvantages to that?
Well, the only warning we typically give clients when they seek legislation is, you have to be aware that anytime you open your act or your chapter of law, there is the possibility that somebody that wants to do something negative to you, that's their opportunity to come in and try to do that. It's more difficult with a local bill because once you have gone through that delegation process and published that notice in the paper, you've kind of locked in the issues that you are telling the public you are going to try to address. And there is a process that you can deviate from what you've told the public that you want to do and the delegation you want to do, but it's a difficult process to overcome. So really the only downside is what I think is a very slim possibility that if there was some body or entity out there that really had it in for you, that would be their opportunity to try to do that. Again, it's much more difficult with local bills for that to occur just because of that unique and separate process it has. But in full disclosure, that is, as far as I can think, that the main downside, putting aside, whatever it might cost to hire a professional to try to help you through that process. I guess that would be a potential downside, that you've paid someone and then perhaps you're unsuccessful. But those really are the only two downsides that I can think of.
If we're successful, as in accomplishing this, is there any negative aspect as opposed to where we are now?
If you're successful passing it, I can't think of a negative or a downside to that. You know, you've talked about things like essentially terminating the land lease and taking ownership of the property that the airport sits on. I don't see how there could be a downside to that. It saves you the hassle of having to go deal with DEP and the cabinet anytime you need to do something different with the property. You know, streamlining it, as Amy and Clara said, looking at ways you could streamline your special act. Again, those would come from you as the ways that we would streamline. So again, I don't see a downside there. So, you know, if you're successful in passing a local bill to amend your special act, I only see benefits there.
Thank you, Chris.
And Mitch and Cheryl, I'll give you a chance now if you have any comments or questions. Mitch, you want to go first?
Sure. There's a lot of there. Thank you for sharing that with us. I heard everything. I understand what we're thinking about, and you know, when I get back, I'll try to get with Clara to get a little more update on that. But the presentation was informative. Thanks. Good questions, also from us all. And I have nothing really to add. I know we're at the beginning of whatever this process may be, and so we'll see where we go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mitch. Cheryl, can you hear me? You still online?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Jim?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Great. Just an observation again to reiterate. Thank you for yes, that painful painting that you have done for us on the overall process. But just an observation, guys, that one of the biggest issues that we have dealt with in an ongoing way is long-range planning. What do we do? What are the things that we need to do, to change, to make us better, to better position us for the future? And this is the opportune time for us to really take a look at that from a blue sky perspective. If we could reinvent ourselves, how would we do that for the future? And I think it would be well worth our time to perhaps either have a workshop on it after we have a little bit of thought process that has gone on with staff and perhaps with outside counsel as well, to see, is it worthwhile and what would it look like? It seems to me like it would be, but just something to think about.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate that. And just from my own perspective, I guess we could start down the road of investigating, but if we got pushback from the local delegation, as Chris pointed out, we could always stop at some point and say, okay, well, we tried, or we modify it, or...
I think that would probably be, once we identify what the key issues are, I would assume, and Chris can I've not gone through this process, that's why we have the legal team with us. I would assume that we would want to shop that to the legislation to gauge what level of support we would get. And when you talk about, Mr. Folden, a possible negative, I think a negative would be how would it be perceived in the local community, and making sure that we structure this in a way, as Ms. Budd mentioned, as securing the long-term planning capabilities of the team, of the airport authority. We've done a strategic plan. We're in the middle of a master plan, and this is sort of the next iteration of that. The master plan will help us identify land use policies. That's one of the objectives. So that I think this fits right well with that. So I think as far as a negative is who would want to take issue or object to the elements that we're looking at, and it's how we present that, I think, will be key.
So the first step would be finding out the elements as we go through the act. And Amy, yes, please.
And I think an interim phase of this, from a practical perspective, the two relationships that are expressed in your enabling act is obviously the one with the trust as to the land, but then also with the city as to how you go through building codes and zoning type of issues. And so, and then there's the it's not addressed in here, but it's the very practical relationship that you have with FAU. And so after you do some visioning and you identify things where you feel like there's room for improvement within the Enabling Act, I would suggest that you reach out to those local partners to give them a sense of comfort that what you're suggesting is not going to infringe upon their rights, because getting their buy-in, I think, will have a very salutary effect on the local delegation. So I think you'd have that interim space.
So I guess I'm looking for consensus of the board. Do we want to move forward in this process as we work scoping, is that the word, as we look through the land use and all the other longer-term issues that we're looking at? Add this to the list.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bob says he needs to add something. I just received a message.
Okay, Bob, yes, sir.
Do you need something,
No,
Bob?
that was the timing issue that Chris talked about a little while ago. Because of the election, the timing's a little different.
Understood. Thank you.
Are we here to just agree to do this, or?
I think what I would think would be a logical next step is if there's consensus among the board this evening for airport management and legal counsel to go back and do some of this preliminary review at the staff level of issues that we would recommend back to you, and then have, as Ms. Budd indicated, maybe a workshop in September that would give us your input based on that research that we would conduct, and then that would arm Chris and Bob and Amy to go through the review of what it would take at the legislative level.
Do you need?
September's only 2 weeks away.
Well, mid-September.
Do you
Absolutely.
think we need a motion, since this would involve some legal fees as we do the review, or consensus, is that enough for you? Amy, I'll look for you as our parliamentarian.
You have an existing agreement with us as a firm that I don't think the scoping process requires a formal direct, vote, but just getting consensus on your direction, I think, is important.
So everybody here agree to go forward? Or
Yep.
Gene?
Yeah, I'd like to see an action plan, an outline of the process, so that we know where we are in that process.
At the planning session
Yep.
we talked about?
I think that would be good.
And Mitch and Cheryl, do you agree it's okay to give authority
Yes.
to move forward to staff? and attorney?
Absolutely, and speaking to the observation about having a timeline, I think that's really important, even though we have a few extra months than we thought we had. If we could get that timeline, that would be wonderful, and if we could get it by September. And just some, if I may ask one question, does it sound reasonable to our outside counsel that we can accomplish this session? I mean, I understand you don't necessarily know the scope and all that type of thing, but given the timing, assuming that we go forward and that we are able to come up with some ideas that are appropriately supported and endorsed on the local level, is this a doable thing in one session, in this coming session?
Yeah. Chris, can you hear that? I think that kind of falls into your.
Yeah, and the answer is absolutely. Once we have, as long as we have, I think as y'all were calling a scope of issues that we want to include in the bill, as long as we have that by, mid-November, I think between me, Bob, and Amy, we can turn it into legislation, and we can get ourselves on the delegation agenda, which will then allow us to begin working those members of the delegation to make sure they're comfortable with the scope of issues that we're seeking. So, that gives, August, September, 3 or 4 months. I'll try, as part of this timeline, I'll work with Bob and Amy on putting a timeline together. I'll reach out to the Palm Beach County Delegation Secretary, who I have a really good relationship with, and ask her if she has an idea yet of when she thinks the first delegation meeting will be. And Palm Beach actually has a little bit different rules than some of the other delegations. They actually have a special meeting just for local bills. So I'll ask her if she has an idea of when she thinks the local bill hearing will be. And that way in our timeline, we can provide a little more definitive answer as to how much time we have to get this thing ready for the delegation.
Okay. And just to be clear, that November date that you just identified, you said if you have it in hand by November, are you saying that in hand by November and already endorsed by the county? Because that might take some doing.
Understood. You know, these issues don't have to be formally blessed by all of the stakeholders prior to going to delegation. It certainly makes things smoother. But you know, in my world, I'm focused on that delegation deadline and getting it there. And sometimes getting it on the delegation agenda encourages those conversations which maybe have been put off by some of the stakeholders. Knowing that it's going to be heard by the delegation sometimes encourages those conversations to occur.
All right, thank you.
And I do apologize if my presentation was painful, but as somebody—
No, it was really the legislative process that's painful, not your presentation.
Yeah, I think you accurately described it. The process itself is painful.
Yes.
Correct.
Hey guys, this is Mitch.
Yeah,
I was dropping. I'm back. I just you had asked a question and Cheryl answered first and went down that road, and I didn't want to interrupt, which is cool. I just wanted you guys to know that I felt that I'm in agreement as well in proceeding, as you all have felt the same.
Great. Okay, then hearing no objection, sounds like we have unanimous consent to instruct staff and legal counsel to move forward investigating this issue, and also to set up a planning session at some point in the next month or so. Okay, anything else you need for the record? Okay. Bob and Chris, thank you very much for your help.
Thank you for the time.
Okay, next item, 9D, presentation of the Boca Raton Airport Authority's annual operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2022 through starting October 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2023.
Wouldn't that be fiscal year 2023? I mean, it's talking about it says 2020.
But it starts in 2022, so.
Oh,
It says 23.
Yeah, over here it does. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
It was a
I'm just seeing it looks
misprint
like.
on
I have a typo, Mr. Tucker.
my agenda. Yeah, good point. Very good.
My apologies. It's 2023.
2023.
Begins October 1, 2022.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
There we go.
My apologies.
Good point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know from your service on the board over a number of years, we develop a budget every August to bring to you that is based upon our strategic objectives identified in the 2021 strategic plan. The state requires that we have an adopted budget by September 30th, the end of the existing fiscal year. We prefer to bring it to you in August in case there are any changes to the budget that may be required as a result of your input. And then we still have the September meeting to meet that deadline. But as I indicated, the budget is based on our effort to achieve the Airport Authority strategic objectives identified in the strategic plan, which revolve around planning for financial resiliency, improving our infrastructure, developing those land use policies that we just talked about and practices, promoting our value to our local community, and shaping an organizational culture that allows us to continue to strive for excellence in all that we do, including fixing our technology. So just really quick, a high-level review of some of the inputs that went into building our budget this year, some of the highlights for the budget year that ends September 30. We, as indicated earlier, completed our amended and restated lease with Atlantic Aviation that extends their lease, but requires a $40 million investment in the first 7 years. I'm happy to report that Atlantic Aviation is proceeding expeditiously. They're close to 50% plans already through the city. We have weekly meetings with the city on the permit review process, so they are diligently moving forward with getting permits for that large project. We're also restarted the master plan that had been put on hold, waiting for feedback from FAA on a particular issue. We've expanded our pilot community and legislative outreach. And we also have great news from the Palm Beach County School District. The academy, the Aviation Academy at West Boca High School was approved, and we will be formally engaging with the school on that program in the next few months. We've also completed approximately $4.7 million in projects so far, including about 80% of the airport road project. There's still some scope left to do, some security enhancements that are underway, and improvements to our communications over at the tower, plus the taxiway project that was completed earlier this year with 100% FAA grant funding. In terms of our air traffic activity, this is just a look at what the trends have been for the last 5 years and current year to date. You can see, of course, there was an upward trend during the presidential visit to Mar-a-Lago, and then, of course, 2020 with the paradigm shift due to COVID, but we did see a very strong recovery in 2021. Looking forward, we believe that the air traffic activity will start to stabilize. This is currently what we're seeing right now without those very sharp increases, but more stable activity.
So you think we'll end up in 2022 at around 83,000?
It's certainly looking that way, given that we're almost to 50, that right now.
90,000 off.
Correct. Correct. So, next.
Yeah.
I promise it's not me.
There we go. In terms of our fuel sales, which, as you know, are a revenue generator for us, we do get a percentage of the wholesale price on the fuel. Certainly, you can see again that recovery in 2021, which has led to an increase in our revenue, and you hear us talk about that every month. And similarly with customs, we started the facility halfway through 2018. 2019 was a great year as far as passenger and aircraft clearing. Then 2020, and then you see the recovery for 2021, and we seem to be in a pretty good pace to match in 2022. And for our 2023 proposed budget, the attachment for the item in the formal budget report identifies some of the assumptions that we used to build the budget. Our major sources of revenue that we're budgeting for, of course, rent revenue. 73% of the revenue that we generate comes from those long-term ground leases, and revenue from hangars and buildings that have reverted to the airport authority. The next largest source of revenue are those fuel flowage fees, followed by customs facilities and other revenues which are miscellaneous, like car rental revenues and very small other sources. So in terms of our overall revenue summary, what you have here on the screen is a summary of the 2022 budget, what we requested, where we project we're going to end in 2022, and comparison to the request for next year, and those changes from the current year budget and current year projected. So our total operating revenue that we project for current year ending September 30 is about $6.2 million, and what we're projecting for next year based on adjustments to ground leases, adjustments to the fuel flow revenue, et cetera, is about $6.5 million. We also have non-operating revenue that comes from interest on our investments, those very conservative instruments that you know about from the investment policy, our CDs and CDARs, as well as the operating grants. These are grant reimbursements for projects such as the master plan and the observation area and others, for a total non-operating revenue of about $1 million projected. In terms of our expenses, again, the report does highlight some of the key assumptions that went into the personnel and other expenses, professional services. I will note that under professional services, this additional one-time support that we are contemplating getting from legal for the review of the statewide issues is identified in professional services, but in our accounting system, we will be accounting for it separately because it does differentiate from the regular monthly operating support that we get from legal, as this is a one-time expense of about $50,000. Our airport operations, you see there's also a large increase there. That's for a one-time rehabilitation of the runway for airfield striping and markings that Scott Travis and the Rob Abbott and Rob Pratt will be working on this year. Overall, our operating expenses for current year, you can see there's a drop based on our budget to project it, and that's mostly because of those projects that were deferred or slowed down waiting for FAA, the master plan, the observation area. Those will be moved on to next year, and so we're projecting about 3.8 for our expenses this year and requesting about $5 million for next year in total. There are also two capital outlay requests. One is for the incinerator at Customs. We have asked for this a couple of times, and again, our promise is if we don't need it, if Travis and Rob can keep it together, then we won't spend it. But if we don't ask for it and don't have it in the budget, if an emergency situation occurs, then we'd have to come back for appropriation request. And then we're also requesting for replacing one of the two operations vehicles with a new vehicle.
What's the chance of one of those vehicles being EV?
We're actually proposing to replace a truck with a hybrid SUV.
Oh,
we
great.
had looked at a full electric, but the supply is just not there, which is unfortunate because we really think that we want to go in that direction, but it's not feasible this year, but we are looking for a hybrid vehicle.
Great.
We also have, in addition to the ongoing projects that are in various stages of design and construction currently, 3 new projects that will be added to our ongoing capital improvement plan. Those involve rehabilitation, a design for the rehabilitation of the service road that goes on the east side of the airport over to the tower, some stormwater and wildlife mitigation also on the airfield design, and those will have SDOT and FAA funding, and then a large SDOT project funded for construction of nav aids and airfield lighting that are currently under design. This will be the construction phase. So if you take our revenues and expenses, our operating income before depreciation that's projected for current year is $2.4 million roughly, and we're budgeting next year for about 1.4, 1.5. We do have to keep depreciation, even though it's a non-cash expense as a government enterprise fund. And you can see what that does there. So that does reduce our net income after depreciation. We also have some non-operating revenue that I mentioned that is in the form of grant reimbursements, and then capital outlay and capital contributions, and then we do have those state and federal grants that are planned. So overall, our 2022 projected change in net position is approximately $3.5 million, and our 2023 budget reflects proposed projected change in net position of about $3 million. As was mentioned, Mr. Nobles, the Secretary-Treasurer, is not here, but he did sit with us last week for several hours, reviewed all of the individual line items that comprise the budget, provided his comments and his recommended changes, and the budget that is presented for you tonight does include those changes and comments from Mr. Nobles. So he has asked us to tell you that he has done that and that he does recommend adopting the budget this evening. So with that, on behalf of the Secretary, Treasurer, and Airport Management, I recommend Resolution 082222 authorizing the fiscal year 2023 operating and capital budgets.
Okay, I'll look for a motion.
Second.
Okay, Mel, a second from Bob. Okay. Any other questions, comments of the staff? Randy did review all the details. I would mention just that the 2022 and the 2023 objectives are part of the review we do of our executive director, so those are, make sure you review those carefully in the board packet agenda, and they'll come up again when we get to the end of the year, but that's important stuff. So Mitch, you want to go first? Any comments or questions?
Thank you. No, I'm good. No, cool. Okay. No worries. I'm fine. I'm fine with the explanation and the details from today and my prior conversation with Clara.
Okay, great. Thank you. Cheryl?
Cheryl appears to have dropped off.
Okay, Cheryl's on. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimously approved. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
staff. Thank you.
Chair.
Clara, anything else? Then we have the authority board members' requests and reports next. Bob? Okay, I'm sorry,
I think
Clara?
we did
We do have the liaison list?
Oh, yes, very important, yes. That, let me get to, so you had in your board packet at the end, the, assignments to various projects for our board members. Since we can't have committees, we have individuals, and you'll see each of your assignments there. Bob, Randy, Mel, Mitch, Cheryl, and Jean, all of us. So again, Claire and I tried to leverage board member interest and, your operating strengths. So if that's, fine with you, then we can, go ahead and use these. Do we need a motion to approve? I can't remember. Okay, they're my assignments. So if you have an objection, yeah, you please note it here now, and we can change it. Okay. Hearing none, then we'll go ahead and make those assignments for you for the coming year. So now we're at the board member assignments, and any comments. So Gene, any comments on the meeting? Any
I'm good.
things going forward?
Fine.
No?
All great.
All good? All right. Any other public comment cards come in the meantime? Okay. Now, the last issue we have for next meeting, September 21, 2022, we have as a 5 p.m. We did talk at the last meeting about maybe changing the time earlier in the afternoon. Since, again, we have a few board members who aren't here with us, I don't know if we want to make a decision now, if you're comfortable to move it or keep it at 5 o'clock, and at least for one more meeting, and maybe there'll be others at the meeting next time, and we can consider maybe moving it earlier in the afternoon was kind of what people thought might be all right. Anybody want to try to move it at this point, or we're just gonna keep that in our minds and meet at 5 p.m.?
I think when more people are
When we get
present.
the whole group.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, with that then, our next meeting will be at 5 p.m., September 21, 2022. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.